All right.
Yes.
Okay, welcome to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. We've been off for the last couple of weeks, and I have to tell you that I missed you all. So I'm glad that we're back here today. And, today promises to be another exciting conversation as we've had in the past. It is appropriate that we talk about 9/11 because it is 9/11. It's amazing that it was 21 years ago.
21.
It's just amazing. We are lucky today to have, first of all, let me say that we're dedicating the program today to Marcy Borders. And I don't know how many of you knew that she was a Black woman or how many of you knew. I think that photo of her, I don't like calling her the Dust Lady, but that's what she came to be known. That's how she came to be known by that name. But she was so much more than that. She was a mother. She wasn't. I thought she was married, but she was in a relationship. She was a professional. Her whole world changed from that one event. And as our guests that we have here today, at least two of them were in the building and made the same decision that she did to exit. She unfortunately lost her life in 2015. She was 28 when it happened. She was, and what I want to talk to our guests about today too, what made you, unlike other people, what made you just say, I gotta go? Because if you listen to the video that I sent you of Miss Borders, she talks about how, they were telling her to be calm and what have you, but the building was shaking and she was having no parts of it. So I'm real curious to see, like, what is it that made you say, I'm out, right? And she, left, and she had a hard time. Her life was never the same. She became an alcoholic. She was depressed. She couldn't come back into the city. And she lived in Bayonne, New Jersey, which for those of you who don't know is just barely across the bridge. So it was devastating. And, I think everybody on this call knows where you were on 9/11 and what you were doing, how you were impacted by it. Our lives, particularly in terms of how we travel, has changed forever. I mean, there was no TSA and all that stuff. And that will never go away. So we're going to hear from our guests, but I also, want to hear from each of you. Like if you have something special that you want to share with us. Every week I think I'm telling you all about some new part of my life. I think a lot of people didn't know that I worked for United Airlines on the day that this event happened. And I was at Kennedy Airport when it happened. I think I was arriving at work when the first tower hit. And by the time I got into the building and got settled in, the second tower had been hit. So we were like watching this thing unfold in real time. So I'm going to share my story with you too. But for right now, we're going to open up. We're going to start with Judith. So our guest today, let me just tell you, Judith and Josie corrected me that I was not using your full name, and you took it down. I just had Judith Francis. She wanted me to be sure and hyphenate your name. So can you tell us your full name? You're muted. You're still muted. Okay, there you go.
Judith Francis Fairtonbrook.
All right, and she is in France. And she's going to talk to us about her journey out of the building from the 101st floor, and she'll give you all the details. I'm not going to.
102nd.
I'm sorry?
102nd
floor. Okay. So she's going to talk to us about that. David Hood is here. He was an attorney for the Port Authority. You were in Tower 2, right, Dave?
Tower 1, 60th floor.
On the 60th floor. And then there's Donita Judge. Hi, Donita. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us today. Donita worked at United Airlines too. She was at Newark Airport. I was at Kennedy Airport. I did not know Donita then. And there's been this story for many, many years that I also believed and repeated, that Donita was supposed to be on the plane and she has swapped out with another flight attendant, but she's going to dispel that for us here today and give us the details. So because Judith I'm going to bring all three of you onto screen live, spotlight, but we're going to start with Judith because of the time difference, if that's okay with everybody else. Okay. What time is it over there, Miss Judith? You're still muted.
10:15
10:15?
p.m.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
not bad.
wow.
But it's certainly not 4 o'clock.
Not too bad.
Yeah, so but as I said, today we're, can we just keep in mind that I wanted to talk about, I called the program today 9/11 from a Black perspective, because I don't know that we've spent a lot of time talking about 9/11 from a Black perspective. And is it the same? Do we all, do we regard 9/11 today the same as we did in 2001? I don't know. And what were your feelings then? What are your feelings now? Have they changed? I shared with you all an article that nobody seemed to remember, but I just remembered that there were these Black firefighters who didn't want the flag on their truck because, the whole country was patriotic at that point. So I shared that with you all too. But for right now, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to Judith, and then we'll, let the conversation flow from there between all, Dave and then Donita, and then we'll just bring everybody in one by one. So Judith, the floor is yours. And if you're not talking, can you please make sure that you're muted? Thank you. Not you guys, Dave. You guys stay on mute, and Donita, because you all can hop in as this conversation flows. So go ahead, Miss Judith.
All right. Hi, Dave and Donita. Nice to meet you as well. It's good to meet other people. I was speaking to a journalist on Thursday right before I flew out, and he said 18 people survived in Tower 2 who were above the impact zone.
Right.
And I happen to have been one of the 18. I did not know that. And I don't know if they actually have the correct count of how many people were above the impact zone. So the impact zone was from the 77th floor, 77 to 86th. And I was on the 86th floor turning to the 85th when my tower was hit. So I was right at the point and literally under here as the plane was entering, and the sheetrock from the entry of the plane just spilled into the stairwell. And the day after, on September 12th, I had to go to Lutheran Hospital in Brooklyn to get my eyes washed out. As Helen said, my name is Judith Francis. I worked in Tower 2 on 102nd floor of the World Trade Centers. I was becoming a permanent employee at Aon at the time. And the morning of September 11th, I was literally just walking in. I had promised a colleague to come in early to work to do a presentation for him. There was a global conference call that morning, and his wife was pregnant, and he wanted to go across the street to Century 21 to purchase baby clothes because she was already 8 months. And I actually think that promise saved my life, because I normally came into work based on the schedule of the PATH train. I would be at work in the elevator about 9 o'clock. That morning, I got in a little bit earlier, about 25 minutes. And as I was walking in on the floor towards what was now my new office, facing northern Manhattan, I saw something, and I can't say what is that something. I just saw a dark thing coming towards the towers, and it was headed towards Tower 1. And then when I stepped across and looked into my boss's office, I went in to comment on how beautiful the day was. We need to get outside and have lunch outside. But his blinds were closed, so I didn't see what it was. And as I was speaking to the journalist on Thursday, he remarked on being told that the plane turned around at one point, where when I was filming for Dateline, NBC did an interview with me, and we had gone across to Jersey City State Park, and one of the state security groundsmen said that after Tower 1 was hit, a second plane was coming in, and it was coming in straight. And perhaps word had gotten to them, the hijackers of that second plane. The plane turned, instead of going into the tower like this, as the first one did, it turned around and went back. So that thing I saw very well could have been the plane that was turning around, and disconnected in my head only on Thursday after speaking to the journalist. And when it came back up along the river, it came in like this. 70, I mean, granted, the height of a plane is about 7 floors, but the angle at which the plane came in is what I believe saved my life as well. Because I know if it had come in like this, there is no way I would be sitting here. Not when I think of Tower 1, and I don't believe there are any survivors from Tower 1 who were above. When I saw the first plane hit, I was looking down at Tower 1, which got hit on the 99th floor. That was the top part of the hit for Tower 1. And when I saw that happened, all I saw were paper, you can tell as the plane was entering, there were papers and furniture and we know body parts and whatever else just being spewed out as the plane was entering. This is what I saw spilling out of Tower 1, and I'm looking down on it and I'm rubbing my face because the heat that rose, the buildings were glass and steel. So I'm standing there looking at this and I'm shouting, oh my God, what are we going to do? My mother's question from the Labor Day weekend, the week before, she and I had gone to the plaza of the World Trade Center with my nephew and nieces. And we were sitting in the plaza and she asked me the question, Judy, what would you do if something happened up there? And the 3 things that prompted me to run: her question, the heat on my face, and what was unfolding before my eyes. Perhaps in addition to the fact that my skin felt like it was melting. I know my hair had singed, which I later, you get home and you're like, what is this? And within 3 seconds, I think, I can say minutes, but I think things were happening so quickly that the decision-making had to be like this. And I'm looking at my watch. Judy, what will you do if something happened up there? We're sitting on the plaza. She's looking up, where do you work? Do you have to take this job? These are the questions that she's asking me. And I said, Mommy, can you please stop? We're here for the kids, for them to enjoy themselves on the plaza with us. And she kept asking the question. And I said, I will cross that bridge when I get there. Not realizing that 8 days later, I would be crossing that bridge. This was the Labor Day weekend right before, and her question came. The Sunday the 9th, right before. I had gone into Manhattan with a friend of mine who was visiting from France. And she wanted a pair of sneakers and a number of other things that she can purchase cheaply in New York. We know many people go to America, to New York especially, to shop for clothes and whatnot. And that evening, Sunday evening, I bought a pair of gray, orange, and white sneakers. And that's what I was wearing that morning. Sneakers which I put on 3 or 4 times before finally deciding, you know what, I don't care. It's the financial district, you know, we think of how we are dressed when we go into the workplace. And I had never worn sneakers to work. I took off the business looking shoes that I was going to wear in because I knew I had my heels at work in my desk cabinet, and walked out onto Central Avenue, got the bus to Jersey City to the PATH train. And I got in about 8:30, got upstairs after being welcomed by Larry. I know Larry died. He was the security guard who welcomed everybody in. He knew everybody by name, and I looked for him after 9/11, couldn't find him, and then learned that he died. Got up to the floor about 8:42, and a few minutes later, there was this thing, and shouting, oh my God, what are we going to do? I later learned that a few people heard me say that and ran. My colleague, I'll just say her name, but I don't know where she is, Louisa. She was in a meeting with the president of the group on a conference call, and she came out and I called her to me, and she came, and she said, I later learned she was going to the office to call her husband. And I called her to me, and she said, but my children, my Bible, everything is in my office. And I said, Louisa, we need to leave now. And with that, the way I stated now, she realized I was serious and something was going on. We need to leave now. I smelled jet fuel, and I thought, why am I smelling jet fuel? None of this connected in my head that we were under attack. I think it was simply a moment by moment thing of when we got to the receptionist area and people are there sitting asking, where is Jackie, the receptionist? You know, she needs to call downstairs to ask security what we should do. And I said, we need to ask security what we should do. We need to get out of the building. Get out of the building and we'll deal with this later. Come on, guys, you can't just stand here. And I think after 6 minutes, and again, it's looking at my watch and counting what has to be done, that I actually left the floor. I had asked Gary, my boss, where Erica is. Erica is the woman who was going to mentor me. I was now getting a permanent position with Aon. And this amazing woman was going to be my mentor. She had been raped in her apartment. And she was just this powerhouse of a person who she used that as a way to propel her into a different life, basically. She had come, he said, oh, don't worry about Erica. She'll be in at 10 o'clock. She is due to be in at 10 o'clock. Erica, being Erica, got to work that morning and she died as well. So 6 minutes anyway, after the first plane hit, I found myself in a stairwell. Again, not realizing it was the stairwell. And up until, I think a few months ago, I didn't realize that it was stairwell A or B that goes all the way down, whereas the other two, you have to change stair banks to get down. I happened to have stepped into the stairwell that went all the way down. And as we were going down, on the overhead, they were announcing, please return to your offices. We have everything under control. Over and over, and I'm hearing this, and I'm thinking of all of the people who chose to remain in their office. And as I entered the stairwell, I'm shouting, we need to get out. Again, just my words. Who listened? I don't know. Get out of the building. We'll deal with things later. Please return to your offices. We have everything under control. Dave and Donita, I know you can speak to the survivor's guilt of thinking what else I could have done to have gotten people to move that morning.
Take your time.
Because the
Breathe. 21 years later.
there's so much that
Just
could have
breathe
been
now,
done.
Judith. Just breathe. Just
Breathe.
breathe.
Mhm.
Just breathe. Exactly. Just breathe.
So in my speaking with you, and I've heard the story already. I mean, you were a hero that day. You saved Louisa, you saved yourself, and we talk about the resilience of Black folks and whatever. And, I think about your mother and the mother wit, like what possessed her to even plant the seed in your brain to start thinking about the what ifs. There's so much that, and I understand what you're feeling. I'm feeling it with you. But it's amazing 21 years later that still it's so emotional for you, but not surprising.
Yeah, the pain doesn't go away. You learn to live with it. That's really what it
Right.
is.
You do. The thing that stands out for me is, and this was just, as you just mentioned, the mother. I think there's a parent, there's a nurturer in most people, where as I was running down, I was holding Louisa's hand with my left hand, and every person I passed, it was, I don't know where this came from. It was necessary for me to touch them as I went down and say, please do your best. Please do your, and I know most of them didn't make it. There was one woman who stood out for me in particular. She was wearing like a Bordeaux, sort of this color top, the suit. It was an accordion pleated skirt and matching top. Thick, wavy, not curly, wavy hair, a white woman, fully gray, heavy set. And I know she did not make it. Because when I passed her from the very beginning of when I started running out, I counted back in my head after I got out and saw what was taking place later. She did not make it.
Judy, tell them
But-
about how many flights you came down. You didn't share that.
I was on 102nd floor, so it was two
Yeah.
flights
Yes.
per floor.
Yeah.
So 204 flights of, it's,
Yeah. No, you did it in record time. I can tell you that. Just based on what you said, I can tell you. So.
I think you said 65 minutes. Is that right, Judah?
Sorry.
I think
55.
55. Okay.
Yeah. We got out about 3 to 5 minutes before, based on when the 9/11 commission, I didn't know details because I didn't watch television. I didn't read the newspapers. I didn't look at anything. I heard television that evening when we got to Luisa's family home. And on occasion, when I was staying with my brother, I would hear the TV, but I consciously decided I did not want my story to be tainted by television or anything.
Mhm.
Plus, to look at it over and over,
Mhm.
I felt it traumatized me even more than I already was. My first nightmare started at 2 a.m. the following day, September 12th. When I woke up that following day, I had to go to Lutheran Hospital to get my eyes washed out. And while I was at the hospital, CNN met me there. The doctor I saw had just given me Ativan. So I'm experiencing the same running out of the building as they're interviewing me, and the Ativan is working. So whatever happened, I never saw the interview, because by the time the interview came on at the end that evening, I was told it was going to be on. I never saw the interview because I was passed out by then. But when the second plane hit Tower 2, as I said, I was turning from the 86th floor, turning to the 85th. Someone had the fire door open. He was on his phone saying, "Oh, I think it was a missile." And to this day, I don't know if I shouted these words out loudly or not, but I said, if it was a missile, wouldn't you want to get the hell out of here? And the reason I don't know if I said it out loud is that I don't usually curse. And that to me is just, it's language that I don't use. But that was the thought I had at the time. And then as I am turning, that's when the second plane came in. And it was literally because the sheetrock broke as the plane is entering, the door is open, everything spilled into whomever was in the stairwell at the time, spilled into our faces. And I released Luisa's hand and I took off. And I got to the 70th floor, stopped by a question. What are you going to say to her family when they ask you? How could I answer that question? That is what stopped me on the 70th floor. What are you going to say to Luisa's family when they ask you where she was? And I stopped and I kept calling, "Luisa, please hurry," shouting through the people that are running by me. She caught up to me. This time I ran in front of her and I held her hand. We got to the 66th floor and firemen were going up. And I think everybody who passed said to them, "Don't go up there." But they went up. And I think we know that 343 of them died. We kept running down. People have asked me if it was dark. I don't remember it being dark because I could see clearly that there were coffee, shoes, tea cups, clothes. People just took things off and dropped them as they were running down. Anything that hindered, they released themselves of and just dropped it in the stairwell. When the plane hit, many people shouted, "Run." Other people shouted, "No, don't run." It was very peaceful. The moment the plane hit the building, it swayed, and then it just kept, you can feel the tremor. Also think of the cry of an elephant, right? Steel cutting steel. Think of a million elephants crying out at once as this plane came through. And it was this very sharp, just slicing the building as the plane went through. And we ran walk, if you will. I think initially people ran and then other people shouted, no, don't run. And I believe if we had run, we would have trampled upon each other. So it was orderly. We got down to the concourse level. Security advised us to go out. When we were on the concourse, we got down and all I could hear was, and I didn't realize what it was at the time. It was things falling from Tower 1, whether it was furniture or people or whatever, it was stuff falling on the plaza right where I was with my mother, brother, and nephew and nieces. And I thought, there's no way I'm going out where security is telling me to go because I don't know that way. I came in from the path train every morning. That is the path I am taking out of the building. I had to pick up photographs from Kelly Photo Services that morning at 10:30. So I knew the path to Kelly and Patek Philippe watches. They were very close to each other, and that is the path I took out. Louisa and I ran to and exited at Day and Church Street. We went across the street. There was a police photographer on the corner of the street capturing what was going up. And when we looked back, I mean, our knees were like this at this point. When we looked up, it was devastating. There were people standing in the window. There was this massive cauliflower cloud, this orange ball with black smoke, just a cauliflower, you know, like you see in volcanoes. And I remember that from being in St. Vincent in April '79 when we had an eruption of the volcano in St. Vincent. So for me, that was the same picture. And we were shouting to people to get out of the area because the buildings were going to drop. There was an ambulance a little bit off to the right, and I was going to run, Louisa and I were going to run to the ambulance. And I thought, when I looked up at the building and then looked down, I thought, no, this is too close. We need to get out of the area. Shouting to people to get out of the area. In a state of shock, people don't hear. We stopped at a cemetery nearby for a few seconds, prayed, and then just kept running. The rest has been years of panic attacks, about 7 times, 8, 9, 10 times a day. The journalist that questioned me the other day, you know, he said, like, well, what were your days like? So I get up one morning, got to the bus stop, and I get on the bus. And the woman sitting across from me on the bus is looking at me. And she was able to tell that I was in the towers somehow. But she just looked at me and said, I am so sorry you had to go through that. And just stating the words, I crashed. One evening, I was coming home from work. I was at Jersey City train station. Got to Jersey City, but there were 2 boys on the path, and they were fighting. And I didn't know that somebody was watching me. And as they were fighting, I am backing up because this was creating something in me. And I'm backing up, and this man is watching me. The train doors open, and I belted. And he came out and held me. And he said, I'm so sorry. So over and over, you would have situations like that where people out of the blue would just come over and say, I'm so sorry.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. I'm going to let you take a breather. The interesting thing that Judith didn't share with us, which was a little bit of humor, how Louisa never took off her high heels. She ran, she, she
She
ran
didn't.
all those floors and through the city and never took off her high heels. So, and we can talk a little bit more about her in a minute, because I think it's also interesting how, you know, we all cope with things in our own way. And I would like for you to talk a little bit about not having, how you all lost touch with one another. Dave, do you mind if I let Donita go next? Because she's going to have to skedaddle a little early.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm okay.
Judith,
No,
thank you. Thank you for
you
your,
don't have to.
Go ahead.
You don't have to do that. You know, I think the flow, the way that you had set was fine. I just wanted to alert you. That's all.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. But everybody's so cordial here. I love you all, and thank you so much for coming, everybody. You know, I wrote down these stats and then I didn't share them before we got started. There were actually 4 flights that morning. 2 were United Airlines, 2 were American Airline. They were all transcons, which is what we called back. I don't know if they still call them transcons, but
Yes.
those were flights that were going from one coast to the next. And 2 were coming from Boston, 1 was coming from Newark, and I'm not sure,
Right.
where was the other one? Oh, Dulles, the one that
Yes.
went into the Pentagon was coming from Dulles. And the
Yes.
total number of deaths, which I'm sure we will never know for sure what that number was, but what it is reported that 2,996 people died, 2,750 in New York, 184 at the Pentagon, and 40 at the Shanksville Downing in the Shanksville plant
Pennsylvania.
in PA. So yeah, so those are just some stats, and I'll share some more with you as we go along. But so whichever one of you wants to go next, it's fine with me. So Donita, why don't you go ahead? We can talk from an airline perspective, and then
Donita, go ahead.
And then we can come back to the towers.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you, Judith, for sharing your experience, and Dave for being here, and all of you who've gathered with us today to really hear us tell our stories that I'm sure we've told numerous times, but they are written in our hearts as well as written in our heads. So I am thankful for this day, 21 years after the horrific events of Flight 90 of 9/11, and specifically Flight 93 that I'm going to talk about a bit about. On September 11, 2001, I had been with United approximately 23 years. I was in my 24th year as a flight attendant. And
you don't look a year over 24.
And I worked that 757 aircraft multiple times. In fact, the month before, Wanda Green, who was on Flight 93, and CeCe Lyles, the 3 of us worked that flight, not that flight, but that airplane back to Denver, a round trip to Denver. I knew all of the flight attendants. I knew Lorraine Bay, Sandy Bradshaw, Deborah Wash, Wanda Green being my best friend. And I'm leaving someone, I feel like I'm leaving someone, CeCe Lyles. Wanda was on vacation in August. She had taken her 2 children, one who started college the day before 9/11, but she had taken them to Hawaii. She was also a realtor, and she asked me to do her a favor. She says, I have a closing at the end of the second week of September, so I need to move my trip. She was working on Thursdays. She was scheduled to fly on September 6th as well as September 13th. She asked me to do her a favor. She says, I need to move my trips, both of those trips, up to earlier in the week. And so I started with the trip on the 6th. That was the closest to the time that, in the beginning of the month. So I moved that trip on the 6th to her flying on the 4th. And many people don't know this, but on the 4th, that aircraft that she was on, an A320, lost a significant engine. Wanda, actually the plane, it declared an emergency and landed. And she called me, and we have a term in the airline industry called deadheading. And that means you take a passenger seat because your flight is canceled. And so Wanda was the queen of deadheading. Every time I talked to her, she was like, I'm deadheading. I'm not working today. I'm working, not working. And so we talked a bit. I was actually in my first year of law school. So I was in the parking lot when she called, talked to her a bit. She seemed okay. I went on. She actually had my son on that Saturday before 9/11. I came in on September 8th. She had my son. We kind of switched places. She went home. I stayed with my son. But that Sunday we talked all day. I mean, we just talked on the phone all day. And then that Monday, she was running around trying to get her son's registration together since he was starting college and would be commuting. And so she was busy. And then she ended the day as a deaconess at her church. And so the next morning I get up, and it's the 11th. It's a beautiful day. And I said, oh, you know what? I'm going to start running again. This is a beautiful day to run. So I got out early, about 7 o'clock. Ran, just for about 30 minutes. And I came home. And as soon as I came home, I picked up the kitchen wall phone, and you all can relate to the wall phone, right? Yeah. So I picked up the wall phone. There wasn't a cell phone for me at that time. It was a wall phone. And so I picked up the wall phone and I called Wanda, and her son picked up the phone, and he said, oh, mom had a, early flight. I said, that's right. I moved her to the San Francisco trip that was flight that left out departure at 8:30, which meant she had a 7:30 check-in. You check in an hour before your departure. And so she was already gone. I was like, no problem. And Wanda was actually from the Bay Area. She had been born and raised in Oakland. She had an identical twin sister, and as well as other siblings, but she was heading out to spend time with her mother because this was such a great trip. I mean, great. We define great trips by what time you check in, how long your layover is, and whether or not you have to make multiple stops. So this was nonstop, long layover, check in at a decent time, back at a decent time. Couldn't ask for a better trip. And the reason that I was able to take Wanda off the 13th and put her on the 11th is because she was so senior. She was the number one person who wanted that. There were a line of people who wanted that trip, but she got it because of her seniority. And so when I get, I realize, she's gone already, and I kind of plop down on the couch and turn on the TV. And so it's still, it's a little early, but, as I'm watching all of it, I'm starting to hear about a plane that had hit the World Trade Center. And I'm looking up at the sky, and I'm like, my goodness, it's a beautiful day. How did they miss it? Never thinking that there was any conspiracy or anything like that, because that's surreal, right? We don't relate to that. We didn't at that point. And so as I'm sitting there, and, and then I decided to call United, desk, since it turns out, there was a United flight. And so as I'm talking to them, I'm watching on Channel 4 at that time, NBC, and I'm seeing this plane. Now they've declared that every plane should be grounded, no planes in the air, but we're watching as a plane is flying towards the World Trade Center. If you were watching NBC, you saw it going right into the building, but it was so real when it exploded. I'm on the phone with the United, and they said, Donita, what happened? Did the plane hit the building? I'm like, no, because my mind could not register that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. Ultimately, after, hanging up, in the meantime, in the background, it's almost like over your shoulder, you're hearing of a hijacking in place. It's like you're barely hearing about a hijacking in place. I don't have any concerns with Wanda, but in any event, I still go up. We did have a computer system 21 years ago, and basically it was operated through your password. And so because Wanda was my best friend, not only did I have my password, I had her password. And so I was able to go in based on my password, check the flight, saw that the flight was still flying at that time. They said it was due to land at 11:37 Pacific time. So I'm good. And so, but ultimately I get a call from United. They say, stay by your phone. And I'm like, stay by my phone. I said, what's going on? They said, please stay by your phone. In the meantime, now I'm starting to hear more of a plane down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And then I get a knock on my door and there's neighbors coming in. One was a flight attendant from Continental. And now I'm starting to become upset. And so I said, well, let me just go into the computer system and pull up Wanda's trip, make sure everything's okay. But, so when I went into the system this time, I put in my name and I put in my password. It said access denied. And I was like, wait a minute, no. So then I go into the computer system and I put Wanda's name in the pass and I put her password. So I'm telling the computer system to open up, it's Wanda. It said access denied. The last time I saw access denied was when United lost a DC-10 in Iowa in 1989, flight 232. And we knew the crew out of Chicago. Everyone rushed to the computer to get online. It said access denied. So at that point, I knew that something had happened. I didn't know. United then calls. As it turns out, Wanda had not updated. She had been flying. Wanda was 4 years senior to me. So she was at that point in her 27th year. She hadn't kept her contact information update other than her children. And they did not want to call her children. In the meantime, her twin sister is calling me from Kansas. She's out on at a convention. She said, I feel like something's wrong. I feel like something's wrong. So I don't want to be the one to tell her. And United is saying, we have no contact information for anyone but you and the kids. We don't want to call the kids. Can you give us contact information? Thankfully, because her sister had called, I had her number right there, was able to give that information. As it turns out, we all know the rest. Flight 93 went down in an area in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in Somerset County. No survivors. There was certainly the stories of the multiple heroes and sheroes, because often we hear about the heroes who attempted to go into the cockpit. But prior to that, the flight attendants were in the back. They were boiling water. They were, as I often say, I'm a civil rights attorney, as I often say, we know that women were often the people who organized. Sorry, men, but but the men were out front, but the women organized. Those flight attendants were organized in the back. I know they were organized in the back, and so as it turns out, it was horrific. In terms of survivor's guilt, I carried it for so very long. I mean, I had one child, she had two, and it was like, what happens now? But someone said to me, and I share it with you, Judith, and I was just like, I just feel so guilty. Why was it me? Why was I the one to put her on the flight if I hadn't did this? And someone finally said to me, my sister, you are not that powerful to determine fate. You're not that powerful. So, let go of the guilt. You weren't supposed to be there. You were in the role that you were supposed to be. And so that has helped me to move forward with it. Certainly after the 21-year period. I mean, as you know, there's been films and there's been lots of things that have been said about Flight 93 and about, all of the different flights. But I knew that crew, and I knew that they did not sit idly by. They would have never sat idly by and let something like that happen. If you have an opportunity, if you're ever heading down 70 west, as you come to Somerset, you'll see the windmills that are circling. It's right in that area. And I remember going down within a day or two, when the plane crashed, the family and all of us went down. And just being there with the community, and just it was devastating. I mean, you could still see the hole. It was devastating. And the following year, we went back every year for the first 5 years. But I was standing there and I was talking to the coroner. The coroner actually was talking to all of us, the group of family members who had come. And I saw something glistening on the ground. And I just reached down, picked it up and put it in my pocket, did not know what it was until, and did not want to turn over whatever it was, to anyone. And it turned out it was a piece of the fuselage of the plane. And so those pieces were still there after, a year or two. And so I have that, and often have thought about, should it be in the Smithsonian? Where should it be? But I chose to keep it myself. So basically that's my story in a nutshell, of my experience with 9/11. Thank you.
That was a powerful story.
Yes. Yes.
And thank you for those words of encouragement, not only for Judith, but for all of us who find ourselves in these what if situations. I think that's advice that we can all kind of internalize and hopefully recall. Very briefly, I actually was a supervisor of flight attendants during this time. I was at the Kennedy Airport, and I arrived to work as the first plane had hit. Didn't know what was happening. By the time I got into the terminal, all hell, of course, was breaking loose, and the second plane hit. They would not let us leave because we were management. So we were kept on site to console, to take the phone calls that Donita just described, because of course the phones were ringing off the hook. Not only were people calling to check on, loved ones who were flight attendants, and cause anybody who was associated with the airport. And I did have a cell phone, Donita. I had a cell phone back then, but it didn't have a camera, because I remember that they had, at some point, all domestic planes, any civilian plane that was in the sky had been told to land at the closest airport. And if you all can imagine being at Kennedy Airport, which is a busy, busy, busy airport, and it's like dead silent. The parking lot, the tarmac looked like a parking lot of airplanes instead of cars. And it was just an eerie place to be, but we had to stay for quite a while, because we didn't know, flight attendants were coming in, and flight attendants live in one place and work somewhere else. It's a wonderful life if anybody's thinking about doing it. But I'm just saying, it was so much happening that day. So I'll talk a little bit more about it. So a lot of what Donita was saying, I remember firsthand, and we were getting firsthand accounts from corporate as it was unfolding. And it was just, a dreadful day. Thank you, Donita. Hope you can hang out a little bit longer, because I'm sure there are going to be questions for you. I put in the chat a link for Jennifer. Thank you for sending that to me. For the pilot of Flight 90, the co-pilot was a Black male. And his wife did an interview and has written a book and has a foundation in his honor. So, today is about celebrating those of us who, Black folks who were directly impacted by it. So let's lift his name up too, as we talk. Dave, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Helen, for inviting me. And I feel privileged to be able to participate. I didn't know about your organization, but I certainly admire the fact that you do have an organization such as this. And again, I like to say I grew up with strong Black women. My mom is 95, and she's doing well still. So I always appreciate being able to be among women and to admire all the strength and support that you exhibit. So
thank you so
I like to think about,
Thank you so much for being with us today. It's very much appreciated.
I'm very happy to do this. And let me just start by just giving you a brief background about, I was on the 68th floor. As you mentioned, I'm an attorney. I'm now retired, but at the time I was one of the attorneys assigned by the Port Authority to represent it in the 1993 bombing. Most people don't remember, but there was a terrorist attack on the port, specifically on the World Trade Center in 1993. That was the first terrorist attack on the US soil, and it's the same people, Al-Qaeda, who attacked the World Trade Center. As a matter of fact, one reason why they flew the planes into the World Trade Center is because they didn't succeed in 1993, and they learned what to do to be successful on 9/11. On the day of 9/11, I was actually preparing, I was on the 68th floor preparing for a 9 o'clock meeting with one of my colleagues. That's because 6 weeks before that, the Port Authority, which is a transportation agency, most people know the Port Authority from the airports, like you said, bus terminals, stuff like that. The Port Authority only got into the World Trade Center because the governors of New York and New Jersey, which is the Port Authority by state, one of them at the time, Nelson Rockefeller, wanted the Port Authority to do that. The governors usually try to get the Port Authority to do stuff that the states don't have money to do. And so that's how the Port Authority got into the business of real estate, essentially, because that's what the World Trade Center became. But the Port Authority had determined that they needed to get out of that business. And so 6 weeks before that, they had leased towers to Silverstein. Silverstein was actually the owner of Tower 7. He had purchased the rights to the World Trade Center because he wanted his tower to be the World Trade Center. So he purchased 7 World Trade Center, which is what the tower is called. That's the tower that he owned. So he had been able and was successful in getting the rest of the World Trade Center site from the Port Authority, leased it for 99 years. And so my job at the time, because I was the lead attorney on the 1993 bomb and handled most of the cases, typically when you do real estate transactions, you want to know what's going on with litigation. And so I was meeting with one of my colleagues to talk about that. At the time, I remember leaving the office to go into the elevators, and just routinely, sometimes you stop before you go into the elevators to go to the bathroom, because the bathroom is on the way to the elevators. So that's what I did. I stopped to go in the bathroom, and I remember that there was this loud sound. The building shook, and it felt like it was going to topple over, actually. And all of the toilets flushed at once. So I knew something bad had happened, because that had never happened. You know, at least I never heard that, never experienced that. When I got out of the bathroom, all of my colleagues had just cleared out, they just left the floor immediately. There weren't that many of us anyway, because that was the first flight to hit the building as American Airlines Flight 11, and it hit at 8:48. So generally, in the morning, sometimes they don't have that many people in the building. And on that particular day, they didn't have a lot of people in the building because, one, it was the first day of school in New York City. So many parents were taking the children to school. But also, it was New York City primary, and there was going to be a new mayor. So people had gone, stop off to vote. So that was one of the reasons why we didn't, normally you'd have a lot more people in the building. And just for that reason alone, you didn't have that many people. In any event, I checked, I looked outside and I could see paper flying and everything else, And so I knew something had happened. Now, typically when something happens in our buildings, because the Port Authority was, like I said, was the original owner of the World Trade Center site. And so we had our own, the Port Authority has its own police force and everything else, because we operate basically like any other governmental entity would. So generally when something happens at our facilities, the police get involved, because obviously something like that, the police will be involved. And once the police get involved, they typically will call the lawyers. They will call us and let us know something's happening, either for us to be on, be on alert, or just to know what's going on. And so nobody was around to answer the phones. Typically, we'd have secretaries and so forth. But like I mentioned, as soon as this happened, most of the folks just cleared out, because many of the people were experienced from 1993. What happened in 1993, just quickly, is when the bombs went off, they went off in the basement. But because of the way the Twin Towers were constructed, the two towers were constructed essentially like, think of a cup and an inverted cup, so they're like two chimneys. And so when the terrorists planted the truck bomb, they planted it at the B2 level, down in the garage, underground garage. They thought it was one of the columns, because they expected, you hit a building and the column topples down, the building would topple over. And unbeknownst to them, that's not how the World Trade Center was constructed. It was, like I said, like more like cups or something, so they're more like cylinders. And so the structure was more on outside. It's called an exoskeleton. And so because of that, when they left the truck bomb there, they thought that that wall was one of the structural walls, one of the columns. It was actually the lunchroom, and I lost 4 of my colleagues that day. One of them, she was actually 8 months pregnant. That was her last day. 8.5 months pregnant. That was actually her last day. But what happened in '93, many of the folks who got injured were actually injured from the smoke inhalation from walking down the stairwell. And so once they heard this commotion, once that happened, everybody with the experience from '93, knowing how long it would take to get down, they immediately went into the stairwell and started walking. And so when I answered the phone, when the phone started ringing, I was the only one left. I started answering the phones. And one of the phone calls were from the cops. And the cop just said, a plane hit the building. So he didn't say what type of plane, what it is. He just, just said a plane hit the building. So what I was hearing as an attorney is more lawsuits, and so I just started thinking of what we needed to do. And so my focus was more on calling claims, calling my colleagues, just getting in touch with people. About just around 9 o'clock, I decided, you know what, let me listen to the radio to at least hear what's going on. And everybody knows 10-10 wins. And if you're in New York, 10-10 wins. They say, give us 22 minutes, we give you the world. So I figured I'll hear at least what's happening on the news. And I remember that is when one of the alarms went off. And it's funny because just before that, one of my colleagues, I answered the phone and one of my colleagues said, Dave, what you doing there? I said, I'm answering the phone. And he said, but the building's on fire, because he can see from outside, can see all the smoke and everything on the building. So I said, well, I gotta deal with the phones. There's nobody here to answer the phones. So then I said, you know what? Let me at least listen to the news to, pay attention to what's going on. And then, like I said, I was waiting for the 9 o'clock news to come on. And that's when the alarms went off. So when the fire alarm went off, I know, well, this is not a drill, because I already am informed that the building's on fire. So we were always told, once it's a fire and you get the alarms, you move down, you go into the stairwell and you start walking down. So that's what I did. Once I got into the stairwell, I see all the people moving down and so forth. Everybody's walking. So then I realized, you know what, I got to start walking down and start moving. Now, I have to tell you, I run, I cycle and so forth. So I keep fairly fit. So I started passing a lot of people and I started passing a lot of my colleagues on the way down, as I am going down. And one of the most difficult things for me is that I live with a lot is over 1,100 people. Their bodies have never been identified. They just were vaporized. So people basically came to work, and as far as the family members know, they came to work, but they just disappeared. And so one of the things that I had to do for many of my colleagues is to do, because usually when you have a death certificate, for you to get a death certificate, you have a body. Now, when you don't have a body, that's an issue. The state wouldn't just give you a death certificate without a body. So I had to do affidavits for people that I passed on the way down. I lost 84 of my colleagues on that day. So I guess what I'm saying is you live with these things. That's why, Judith, when when you reacted that way, I can understand, because that survival guilt, as you mentioned, I deal with that a lot. So, but in any event, I started passing people and I kept going and going and going. As I was going down, I ran into one of my colleagues. He was actually one of the police officers, and I know him because he had the K9, and they were very active after 1993 because, like I said, because of the bombing and so forth, we were expecting more attacks on the World Trade Center site. So we were always in touch with the police and so forth. So when I saw him, I said, "Where's your buddy?" Meaning his K9 buddy. He said he left him down in the basement in his kennel. But he told me, he said, "Watch out when you're going down. It's he said, you know, it's really bad downstairs." So as I'm going down now, and I started getting down, I realized, you know, once I got down to there's a plaza where you can go outside, and all the glass were all broken and everything else, you know. But I said, I got to get outside. And luckily, I didn't go outside there because, as Judith mentioned, some of the thuds were people actually jumping off the building because, as Judith mentioned, the 3 stairwells from One World Trade were all cut off by Flight 11. And so everybody above the impact point, which was the 93rd floor, from the 93rd floor above, anybody who was from above the 93rd floor did not survive. They couldn't because they were trapped from the stairwell because all 3 stairwells were cut off. And so some of them, rather than just wait to die, they would turn themselves off the building. And so a number of people were crushed like that. And so when I was going to go outside, one of my colleagues stopped me and said, "Dave, don't go out there." Because they witnessed people literally getting crushed from the bodies falling. So I then went down to the concourse level. Now, Judith had mentioned that, you know, she was on the 102nd floor and took you so long to walk down, but you did it remarkably in good time, because the second tower to be hit, which was your tower, was the first tower to fall. My tower was hit at 8:48. Your tower was hit at 9:03. Now, I didn't know that your tower was hit because I was already in the stairwell. As I mentioned, I left my desk before the 9 o'clock news. So I left just before your tower was hit. So I was probably somewhere inside the stairwell when your tower was hit. So I didn't know that. But your tower fell at 9:59. Now, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know all of this was going on. So as I got down now to the concourse level, I could see all the glass broken and everything else. And I'm thinking about 1993. My first thought was, wow, this is going to take longer to repair than 1993, because my experience from 1993 was it took us about a month for us to reoccupy the building. So I was still thinking about, you know, I'm still thinking, how do we get back here? And I remember I was walking to get out, and I remember that this is distinct and this is funny. There was this funny sound. It was like a snap, something snapped. And I remember somebody saying, "Take cover." And the next thing I remember is feeling like if you, and Judith, you from St. Vincent, so you're from the Caribbean, I'm from Grenada. So for those of us, and for many people, if you live near the shore or near the beach, when you experience a wave, when a wave hits you, you lose control. Can you imagine like a tidal wave or some tsunami or something hitting you? But that's how I felt. And that's because the tower that you were in, the second tower, Tower 2, it collapsed in 9 seconds. It pancaked down. Once one floor fell, everything else fell down. And so all of that debris was concentrated down below. And that's where I was. I was caught up in that debris field. I remember just seeing the walls. I knew I was flying or something because the walls were just coming fast in front of me, just like it just closing in. And I didn't have any control. And I know I wasn't walking, I wasn't running, my feet weren't hitting the ground. I was just seeing the walls. And the next thing I remember, everything just went dark. And it just became real surreal. You could hear voices, you could hear just everything was quiet, but it's dark, but you could hear, you just hearing the sounds, nothing else, but it's just dark. And then the next thing I remember seeing was this bright light. Now, they always tell you when you die, you see a bright light. So I thought I was dead. But what it was the rescuers, because many of the first responders had lights on the helmet. And so once the lights went out, they put on these helmet cams, these lights. And so all you could see is these bright lights with these rescues. Now, I didn't know how long I was out. That's the other thing too. Okay, so I must have been out for a while before this happened, before I see this bright lights and before I realized that something had happened. Because like I said, everything just went dark, and then the next thing is these bright lights. And I remember thinking to myself, well, maybe I'm dead because this bright light, they say, you always see this bright light. But then I heard the voice saying, if you see the light, come to the light. So the next thing I did is I said, well, let me feel my legs, because if I can feel my legs, then I know I'm all right. And maybe I'm okay. So I could feel my legs. So then I got up and I could feel like I can stand up. So I'm like, okay, I'm okay at least. But then I could hear this voice next to mine. He was really close by. Sounded like a lady's voice. So I reached out and said, gotta try to see if I can help this person. I can't see the person, but I can hear the voice. And then I can feel that person. And she felt really strange. And she said, don't touch me, I'm burning up. And so she must have been badly injured. So I said, you know what? Let me see if I can find a place where I can at least help this person. Started looking around. But then I realized my eyes felt like it had sand in it. And that's because of all the debris and everything. So I felt like I couldn't breathe. So all of a sudden, like you started thinking life-saving, how do I save my life? I got to get out of here. So then I said, you know what, let me just concentrate on trying to getting out alive. And so I said, well, let me at least follow the lights. They say, if you see the lights, come to the lights. So I started walking towards the light. And luckily I was able to get out with the help of the rescuers, the first responders. But what I remember is once I got outside and I looked around, it looked like a war zone after a bomb blast or something, or a beach or something. Everything was just sand, and all the fabricate and all those things were just all mangled. Everything was just mangled. I was like, what the hell happened? No, I didn't know that the towers had collapsed, but I just know that everything just looked not the way it should look. So I said, you know what? Let me try and get to a hospital because I'm not feeling well. I know something's wrong. I'm not feeling right. So as I'm walking, this stranger, I must have been a homeless person because this person just handed me this black handkerchief. And he said, well, a dirty handkerchief, I should say. But he said, you need this, buddy. And so I took the handkerchief and put it to my head, my forehead. And then I looked at it, it's just all red. So I was injured. So I said, you know what, let me really try and get to the hospital. Now, I knew where we were, that there was a hospital. There's downtown Beekman, which is about 3 or 4 blocks away from the World Trade Center. So I knew that I had to get to that hospital. So that's where I started to focus on walking to. And when I got in, the first thing they say, well, they call us the walking wounded, and they say, you got to go to, they had like a triage center set up. And they flushed my eyes. That's the first, because I kept saying, my eyes, I can't see my eyes. So they flushed my eyes. And luckily they said, well, your cornea is not scratched. The doctor examined it and he said, we got to send you to x-ray. Now, while I'm waiting there, sitting in this, this makeshift bed, everything just went dark. And that's because the first tower wasn't, but the second tower to fall, when that fell, everything downtown went dark. And so once everything just went dark in the hospital, I'm sitting there and just all of a sudden everything just went dark. And I was like, you know what, let me get out of here. This is not good. So I got out to the hospital and I started walking up town because by now I know I had to get away from here. So I started walking and by then everybody's walking away from the Trade Center site. So you just fall in the crowd. But what I noticed is people looking at me like this here zombie or something. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not me they're looking at. So I started looking back. And when I looked back, I realized that the Twin Towers were gone. And that's when it hit me that, wait a minute, the Twin Towers were gone. So, and I was just there. So that's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, because the towers collapsed. That's what happened to me. But then I realized, it immediately hit me that, wait a minute, I've just lost colleagues. I know all my colleagues inside there. I know they must be gone. So I said, you know what, I gotta get to another hospital. And that's when I met one of my colleagues on the way, and And he said he was going to stay with me. And luckily, she's like, Dave, you don't look too good. I'm going to stay with you. And God bless him. He was to stay with me. And got to the next hospital. And they did x-rays immediately. They sent me to x-rays and so forth. Luckily, I didn't have any broken bones, but they said, you know what? You're bleeding. We don't know where the bleeding is coming from. So it could be internal, so we're gonna have to keep you overnight. And so I spent the night in the hospital. They called my wife, they let her know that, you know, I was in the hospital and everything else. And that was an interesting night, because during the night, the person who was next to me, my bunkmate, because we all, you know, they all had people, you know, first of all, they expected more people to come in, but nobody was coming in. They were preparing for, the triage was preparing for all these people, and nobody was coming in. As a matter of fact, when I walked into the hospital, again, I was called a walking wounded, and I walked in and they put me through, I keep thinking of this James Bond movie, Dr. No, when the person went through the radiation field or whatever it is, and that's exactly what they did with me. They made me take off my clothes. It was embarrassing, and they first of all, they hosed me down, and then they took off all my clothes and put me, so I was naked, and then they put me through all the x-rays and stuff like that. But the x-rays came back, like I said, came back negative, and it said, okay, we can just keep you overnight and observe you. The next morning when they told me I could go back home, funny thing is my wife picked me up and we stopped by my brother-in-law, and when the first thing he saw me, the first thing he said is I looked like I was in a fight with Mike Tyson, so I must have looked pretty bad. But again, I'm here, and one of the reasons why I like to participate in events such as this is, I always say, I went to work just like many of my other colleagues. We were just doing our jobs and we lost our lives, and one of the things you mentioned, Helen, in terms of statistics, over 70 countries lost people. When we talk about the attack on America, it was an attack on America. Well, what people don't realize is it was an attack on populations from throughout the world, because the World Trade Center had different people in it. I mean, it was not just one race or one set of people. It wasn't just Americans. It was people from all around the world, and people of different religions. And so I like to say, when I tell people the lessons I learned from 9/11 is one, I am grateful to the first responders, because without them, I would not be here. I mean, if it wasn't for them, I would not get out of that building. I may have tried, but when I think of what happened to One World Trade when it collapsed, I might have been still looking around, and so many people were buried when the second tower collapsed, as you know. So I could have been that person trapped inside there and buried once it collapsed. So I'm always grateful to the first responders, like Judith said, 343 New York City firefighters, 23 New York City police officers, with 37 of my Port Authority colleagues as well. So the uniformed personnel is over 400. But also, I also say that I feel like I have an obligation to many of my colleagues who lost their lives to tell the story of 9/11. And that's why whenever I'm offered the opportunity to participate in something like this, such as this forum, I tell people the story, because without telling the story, it's not going to live on. People are not going to remember what happened, so you have to have voices like us to continue to do it. But the third thing that I take away, the third takeaway for me is, despite the hateful act, because again, if we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Al Qaeda attacked the US. They thought that they were attacking the World Trade Center because the World Trade Center represented a symbol. But despite that, there was still a lot of love that was shown on that day. Like that stranger, that person who gave me that handkerchief. New York City is seen as a typically, people don't care, but this person cared enough to give me their handkerchief. And so I always say, love conquered hate on that day, because despite the hate, a lot of love was displayed, and that's what I live with. I live with that love. My position on it is, despite the hate, because people find many ways to divide people and to spew hate and so forth. And I always say, I just feel like as an emotion, love is always stronger than hate. And so that's my story. Thank you.
And you both, in your stories, who you actually displayed love on that day. Judith took Louisa under her wing and made sure she got her to safety, and you were helping somebody. You could hear, they didn't even know who it was, but you knew that it was someone in distress. So I just think, that's what I was thinking as you were telling your stories, that, we're, when the push when push comes to shove, I think we show up for each other. And that's what I heard in all of your stories today. Yeah. Hey, Donita, I wanted to ask you, you said that you all used to meet, I think you said once a year. Are you still in touch with people, and do you all still get together?
Yeah, I'm still in touch with some of my flying partners for sure. A lot of them have actually left the industry now. They didn't leave right away. They went back, because, people still had a livelihood. So once the plane started flying, people needed to go back to work, even though many of them did not want to. But now a lot of them are starting to transition out. Certainly since the merger between United and Continental, it's just not the same, and the industry's not the same anymore. It'll never be the same as it was. I mean, in some ways we were, in some ways very carefree, and in terms of our security in a sense. I mean, the cockpit door prior to 9/11, I mean, a real hard shove, and you could kick that door in. It wasn't, because it wasn't what you were expecting. Now it's like Fort Knox. I mean, you can't even get anywhere near that cockpit door, and particularly if one of the officers, the captain or first officer, come out of the cockpit to go to the restroom or something. I mean, they're blocking it up. Everything is happening. But yes, I am in touch with them, and I started to say that there is a Flight 93 memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, that is absolutely beautiful. It is beautiful. It includes all of the flight attendants as well as the pilots. Certainly, Homer is recognized there. But also, if you're in the area, if you're in New Jersey, Wanda was raised in Linden, and over right off of off of 21 South, going left on Park Avenue a couple blocks, there is a park that it was also designed for her. That is the Wanda Green Memorial Park, where you can just kind of go and remember. And normally I do go today, but because of this, I did not go. But so yeah, we are still in touch, because we will always remember. And one thing I forgot to mention is that one of the supervisors at Newark, a Black woman, Barbara, and I can't remember Barbara's last name, but on the 11th, she walked Wanda to the plane. Wanda was terrified to go on the plane that day, and had never, ever expressed that to me, but really? She was terrified. So she felt something. She felt something. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's not surprising that you're still in touch. Dave, you said you lost 84 people that I'm assuming you knew, most of them, at least by face.
Many of them, like I said, one of the most difficult things I had to do was to do affidavits for people that I saw on that day that I knew was at work. For instance, my colleague who I was going to meet with at 9 o'clock meeting, she just disappeared. So her sister, who was her next of kin, I had to do an affidavit for her to get that certificate, because there was no body, and they've never recovered the body. So that was the most difficult part for me, just dealing with the notion that somebody just went to work and then they just disappeared. That's the end of it.
Judith, can you talk just a little bit about Louisa and how you all lost touch with one another? And do you have any idea why?
I do not know why. I only understand that, and it's something I spoke to my therapist about. I started seeing a therapist about 3 weeks after 9/11, twice a week. And I told her about Louisa, and within 6 months or so, 3 to 6 months, she had begun taking medication to cope And she went from us having the experience to not even being on the floor to not even being in the building, which really upset me because I don't know what was going on. I could not understand that. I mean, yes, I am a trained psychologist myself, but perhaps I had just never, I mean, nobody had ever experienced, no therapist had ever experienced something like September 11th, even, you know, the Holocaust. It's just not something you, even when I went to my therapist, who was a former professor of mine, I would look at her to kind of understand what I was going through, because she wanted me to be on medication immediately. And I told her absolutely not. I took the paperwork from her. Why did Louisa lose touch? We all worked at a makeshift office on 59th Street in Lexington after the event. And slowly she just, it was her way of coping.
She disconnected.
And she disconnected. I left Aon, I left New York. They had offered me a job in Los Angeles after I moved to LA, and I said I didn't want to be around anyone that reminded me of that. I wanted to move to Northern California, just disappear, not have anybody, not family, not friends, not anybody know where I moved to. And the reason I just could not stay away from my nephew and nieces. And that's the reason I didn't do that. They're the ones who maybe kept me in New York even for the 18 months I remained. And then I moved to Southern California I stayed with a woman I didn't know. She was a friend of my mother's best friend, actually, whom I didn't even know. And she said, here is a story for you. She said, if you are going to move to California, you have a place to stay. So December, the first Friday of December 2002, I went to California, arrived around 10 o'clock at night, got to her home. We all went to bed about 11:30 or so. And at 5 a.m., a guy was drinking at the 7-Eleven across the street, got into his truck, drunk, and slammed on the gas. He was drunk. And his truck rammed into her house, split the house at the kitchen point, uprooted the gas main. All we heard was,
wow.
And he took off. I guess it was a Ford truck. We don't know what kind of truck it was. The gas main broke, but the house didn't blow. Called my mother about 7:30 that morning, and she said, you see, you're not supposed to move to California. And I said, I think I got a very clear message that I was purposely saved on September 11th. So I am moving to California. And whatever I am supposed to do or learn from this and gain to whatever I'm supposed to do, I will be moving to California. So despite that, she wanted me to stay in New York because of my nephew and nieces. And that to me was a clear message of being saved on purpose.
Wow.
One of those reasons is the reason I'm here right now.
Yeah, that's just amazing. I know that there are plenty of questions. If you all want to just raise your hand, your electronic hand, I'll call on you. You can share your story or ask questions of anyone who's here. Shakira, you're up. Donita, I'm so happy that you were here. If anybody has a question for Donita, can you please ask it first so that we can, I don't want to hold, I'm so thankful that you came, Donita. I don't want to abuse your kindness. So I understand if you have to leave. So Shakira.
Yeah, hi everyone. I didn't really have a question. I did just have a little story to share. So if anyone wanted to speak with Donita, I defer.
Are there any other airline people? I invited a lot of, I don't see any of them. And I can understand that. I think it's real hard still for people to talk about. Is there anybody here from the airline industry? And is there anybody here who is affiliated with the Pentagon? Because of all the feelers I put out, nobody seemed to know anybody that was affiliated with the Pentagon. Anyone? No? Okay. Go ahead, Shakira.
So thank you, each of you, Judith, Dave, Donita, for sharing your stories. I have never heard of anyone who was in the building. A couple of people that I know who work for the Port Authority and who worked in that building. Miraculously, for whatever reason, they didn't go to work that day, or they showed up late, whatever. So I appreciate hearing the stories from your perspective. I, like most everybody else, I'm sure everybody else know exactly where I was on 9/11 that Monday. I had a contract working for Merck Pharmaceutical in Pennsylvania, and I had taken a train over and heard about a girlfriend of mine lives in Newark and could look over, kind of look across and see the World Trade Center. And she called me and told me that a plane had flown into the World Trade Center. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so this facility that I was in, I'm trying to speak quickly because I'm sure there are other people who want to share. But the building that I was in, like a big kind of a warehouse training facility, and a lot of cubicles. But I walked around and somebody had a TV and people were gathering around the television. And by the time I got to the television, we could see the second tower hit the building. And of course, we didn't know really what was going on until later in the day. And I started feeling, and then, the word began to come out about who it was that hit the building. So by the time the weekend was upon us, I knew, that it was, so-called Muslims. I say so-called, I know that's what they claim. But I, that weekend, I was scheduled to take the diversity course for the master's program that I was in. I did my master's at American University in organization development. And that weekend we were scheduled to have our diversity class. It was postponed because of bomb threats. And so it was postponed for a week. So by the time that second weekend came after 9/11, I was in the middle of a deep depression. And I really couldn't figure out why until I got into the class and we started talking about it. We could not talk about it. And what I realized is that by that time, it was dawning on me that America had identified a second class of niggers, that Muslims were now a new kind of nigger in this society. And me personally, I'm Muslim and I'm a Black woman. And so I was feeling like, oh my God, I've got, I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm Muslim. And now, so I feel triple targeted. And I just went into a depression. I could not shake it. I had just taken on a new coaching client, literally had just signed the contract with her. and I couldn't fulfill the contract because I was too depressed really to account for it. And I just feel like that whole episode, like you said, I mean, it basically changed the character
Sure.
of our country in so many ways. And it really just it changed it changed for Muslims particularly. It just shook the foundation that we had. I mean, I was so glad to hear you, Dave, say that that love prevailed in New York that day, because you know, for those of us who are believers, you know, we know that that Allah said that if you take the life of one person, it is though you have taken the life of the entirety of humanity. So for those people to go in those planes and do what they did, it was shattering. It was just shattering for me. And I know that many Muslims felt the same way. And
You,
so
I have to jump
I
in and
could,
share a story. I lived in Queens when this happened, in Briarwood, which was a very Jewish community. And on that day, there, in New York, they were asking people of Muslim, uh, people who looked Arab,
background, yeah.
Muslim, to stay in the house, like just don't come outside. And, it was a very long day for me, I remember, at the airport, because I think we stayed like the whole shift. We were there for quite some time. And when I got home, my neighbor, who was an Muslim, not only did he not stay in his house, he put on his garb from head to foot, and he put a chair at the foot of his driveway, like almost at the sidewalk, almost
Mhm.
defying anyone to say anything to him. And I was like, oh my God, I understood where he was coming from. But
Mhm.
you're praying like, this has been such a horrible day already. Please don't let anything else happen here. But
Yeah,
so thank you for sharing and being very honest about how you felt as a Muslim woman at that time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And just finally, I just have to say that it was so devastating to me that I could not bring myself to go down to ground zero at all. In fact, so that was in September 2011, 2001. I think the first time I went back there was somewhere around the summer of 2008 or maybe even 2009. And the only reason I went is because I got a contract with American Express and it's right there. I couldn't get there any other way. So
And
anyway, thanks for letting me share that.
I would imagine a lot of people had a hard time going back into the city. I remember too, the smell. Do you all remember that smell
Mhm,
was across the city
mhm.
for a long time? I mean, I lived in
Yeah.
Queens, and you just wonder what you were breathing in, and so yeah. All right. So I see, thank you so much, Shakira, for sharing. I see Joanne. Joanne, did you have a question? Joanne, where?
Oh, now I have a question. Like, I like to bring up three things that I felt 9/11 have. At the time that situation happened, which it breaks my heart to say the pain, and I'm thankful for the people to share. My mother called me and she told me to turn on the TV. And she's in Plainfield and I'm in Orange. We called my brother in San Francisco. We saw the first plane go in. And they already saw the second. I didn't see the second. I said, well, maybe there's delay. And realizing that all those lives was lost, and the pain that the United States had to go into. The third thing is my brother, Joe Urquhart, married Wanda. She was a good friend of Wanda Green. She knew the twins, and I think they're on her family side in regards. I never got to meet her, but I learned about the story and everything. My mother happened to help them get the money that was available to them because she was working for Assemblyman for her children. And the third thing is when I took my son for his job to Sea Caucus, where I was going to college at Jersey City, to look over there and not see those two towers up there, I had to cry.
Yeah,
It was so
absolutely.
painful. For all those years I went to Jersey City, and those towers are always like coming home. But to look over there and not see them, and know that people lost their lives, they affected their friends and family, it was a very painful experience. And I thank your speakers about that, because I was interested in learning the pain and the fortitude, the strength, the love to go through what they went through. And there's one lady I met at my mother's luncheon named Miss Suggs. And she was in the tower, I don't know what one or two, but she said she took her shoes off and ran down all those steps. And she used to come to the luncheon, I think maybe 2 years ago, she finally passed away. So that's my story about the Twin Towers.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
once I go to Jersey City, it's hard for me not to turn my head to the left
Right.
and realize it's not there.
Yeah.
You know, it's painful, but by the grace of God, I thank everybody for sharing.
Yeah, it's been, and I think hearing the stories are empowering for all of us, and a certain kind of way. We all gain strength from hearing the strength of people that you can put a face to, like you just said, that somebody just said I had never spoken to anybody who was in the building before either. It's just so wonderful having this network. I can put out a call and, Sharon McGahee told me, oh, you got to talk to Dave Hood, and Josie put me in touch with Judith. And as I told you, I was one of the people who also carried the myth about Donita. So I knew about Donita, just from being in the airline. Let's see. Lenny, I see Lenny's hand and I see Kilthea. Lenny, do I see your hand twice? Is that what's, oh, no. Lenny, Kilthea, and then Richland. So go ahead, Lenny, and let's be brief, because remember, it's 10 o'clock well, I guess it's what time is it now? It's not 10 o'clock. She looks
6 hours.
lovely. She looks lovely still. But yeah, so let's just try and get the questions in and wrap it up, and because I don't want to take advantage of our guests. I'm so happy that they gave their time to us. So Lenny, go ahead.
Well, my story is actually a sort of a strange story. At the time, I was not working a regular job, and I was visiting New York. And that day, I had planned to go over there and meet some friends. But the night before, I met other friends, and we sort of stayed up talking and everything. We were friends from school. So I overslept. I was awakened by a friend who says, have you watched television? Have you turned on the television? Why are you still home? Have you turned on the television? And that's when I found out about it. If I had gotten up on time and been where I was supposed to be, I would have been in the basement of the World's Towers in the PATH station, trying to get out to see my friends. So, but for the grace of, I would have been there. The odd part about it, though, was another friend and I decided we were going to go over there. It took us months before we could go over to the World Trade Center. And when we finally did, it was the strangest experience. You could still smell the death in the area, even though it had been months. That smell was still there. But worse than that was the feeling that it was like people talking to you without voices. My friend is very sensitive, she's very spiritualistic, I guess you'd say. And she actually had to leave. But we could feel like there was somebody like trying to talk to us, speak to us from those people who were in the tower. A stranger thing, though, is this, that I had been in a situation like Judith and sort of saved somebody's life. But as time went on, they didn't stop seeing me, they couldn't, but they got angry with me. And the only thing I could think of, Judith, to talk to your story was that my presence reminded them of the bad times we had been through. Every time she saw me, even though I had helped her, she kept thinking about that, how scared she was, how close she was to death. And it reminded her. So the easiest way for her to deal with it was to push me away, keep me away, and she didn't have to think about it. I spent literally years trying to figure it out. Like, what? I mean, I did something good. Why am I being treated like this? But that's how, like you said, it's how some people deal with that. They can't. So the only thing, they push away everything that reminds them. You would say, this is a positive. No, they have to get rid of that. They have, if it's a person, if it's a smell, if it's a place, they push all that away. It's not you. You did something good. You saved people's lives, but it's the way they deal with it. It's a problem with them. It's not even that they're bad. It's just a problem with the way they deal with problems and danger and death. And that's how some people do it. I actually had a lot of questions about 9/11. I guess I'm a conspiracy person. I believe it was more than just the people on the plane. I've had people give me books of people who survived, who were in the towers after the plane crashed, which seems to refute some of the other beliefs that were there. But one thing I always remember is this. After that, we had a whole series of security laws that went into effect. They could look at our email. They could listen to our phone conversations. They could do all those. They could literally go in your house without, any type of warrant or so after that, in the name of security. And as Black people, we suffered a lot from that. As Muslims, they suffered a lot. I have family members, close family members who practice Islam, and they always talk about how they felt they were being watched for no reason other than the faith they practiced. And that's forgetting that there were literally hundreds of Muslims who were killed that day during 9/11, who were working in and around the towers. But people ignore all that. So I always want, there's still no sundown laws about all the security we have, about if you go to a place where the president's going to be, for example, they can listen to your phone conversation, and they do.
Yeah.
They can check your email. They do all those things. So speaking back to Shakira, it's not just that you practice Islam. They use it as a weapon to everybody they do not love, they do not like. So it may be you, it may be even a Caucasian person who is not totally, with their program, so to speak. So I guess I always think that, and I just wonder how much did those hijackers really control all the things that are going on. I still can't believe that President Bush said, "Oh, I hear they flew a plane into the building, but I'll sit here and read these books to these Black children here because I don't want them to miss out on this story." So as I said, I identified who I am and how I believe from the beginning, but it's hard to be in a situation like that. Usually, if one person passes, we feel it.
Right.
If it's more than 5 or 10, our minds can't process that. We cut it off.
Yeah.
But in a situation like 9/11, you can't do that. It stays personal.
It was definitely huge, and we will all, from the things that you mentioned to the Patriot Act to TSA, things change.
Oh yes.
Things change. I mean, Donita was saying about security. I used to fly with the flight attendants, and we just went straight through customs.
Right.
We never did any of that stuff. Remember that, Dave? Like we just, and I was not, who said we didn't have guns or this or whatever? You didn't know who we were, but so we were very vulnerable in many ways, maybe cocky. I'm not sure what we can call it. And then some new measures were definitely needed to be put in place. But let's be clear, some of the stuff that we're doing today, I question if we still need to be doing it. But now the TSA is a huge animal that's not going to go anywhere. So thank you, Lenny, for bringing up some of those points.
They developed 15,000 new security
It's not
agencies
going
after
anywhere.
9/11.
Not in
15,000.
yeah.
That's a lot of people looking over your shoulder.
Right.
But
And,
but
yeah.
thank again,
And
Judith.
don't go
Dave,
through with an afro or braids because they're going to mess your hair up. And
I won't even talk about that.
it's
There's
just
another
like,
story
stop.
about.
But anyway, let's get to
But
these
thank you,
last few
Judith,
questions.
Dave, and
Welcome,
Donita
thank you.
for sharing. I've talked about, I haven't talked with anybody who went through that personally, but I really feel how you feel. But Judith especially, it wasn't you. You
All
did
right.
well. You
Thank
did
you,
very
Mr.
well.
Lenny. We got to keep moving. Kilthea, you have a question. Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Okay, there I am.
There you are.
Thank you, Miss Higgy. First of all, thank you so much, Judith, Dave, and Donita for sharing your stories. It was just so emotional and so moving. And, you know, my story is nothing like yours. I live in South Jersey. I worked in Trenton, and I was on my way to work. And I was, and so let me just preface by saying my best friend, who's also on this call, Roberta Haskins, lives in New York City and worked in Manhattan. And I was on my way to work, and the person on the radio said, you need to turn on your TV. And at that point, you could actually pull up channel 6 on the radio. And I was listening, and they were like, it was like a man on the street interview. They were saying, oh, did you see the plane? And the guy was like, yeah, I saw the plane going to the building. And they were asking, what kind of plane was it? And at that point, another plane flew into the second building. And I was like, okay, we're under attack. And so I did have a cell phone, and I tried to call my friend, who is actually my sister, because I've known her since I was 5 and she was 3. So I'm trying to call, but all circuits are busy. You can't get through.
No. Yeah.
So I was like, when you get to the office, you'll be able to get on a landline and get through. So when I got to the office, I see that there's a message, the light is flashing, and it's my friend Roberta telling me, I'm okay. We're not in Manhattan. We're in White Plains at a seminar. So I was like, okay, thank you. So I could kind of relax, but then the day just unfolded in obviously a very odd way. There was only one TV in the building, in the executive director's office. He brought it into the into a conference room where a number of us gathered, and saw the Twin Towers fall. And but during all of this, there's this conversation about the governor, and we're waiting for the governor to tell us what to do and if we can go home, if people can be released. This went even through lunchtime. We went to lunch, we came back. I was in my office and I was like, okay, let me just try and, you know, see what I can get done. My office wall back to my boss's office wall. And not long after we got back from lunch, I can feel like the building is vibrating. And I'm like, what is that? And I just started screaming my boss's name, Mark. And I went into his office and I'm like, what is it? We look out the window. Now we're in an office park right off of 95 as you're coming from Pennsylvania into Jersey. So right at the Fall Bridge. For those of you who know, there's an exit and a little office park with 4 small office buildings and a golf course in the back. I look out of the window, and out the window, there has landed on the lawn a helicopter. The man gets out of the helicopter, a man comes from the building, and the helicopter says US Army. The guy comes out of the building, hands the man an envelope. The man gets back in the helicopter and takes off. Now, this might not be so strange if the Mercer County Airport wasn't not a mile down the street. Airport right down the street. Why are you landing on the lawn? At that point, I told my boss, I said, you know what? I don't need the governor to tell me I can go home. I'm telling myself I got time, I'm going home. So, and that was just kind of how the day went. And I left at that point.
Totally understand. Totally understand.
Using your head and
I would have
thinking.
left too. And I'm trying to think, I know we were held at the office for a long time, and the thinking was that somehow we had it more together than everybody else, and that we were going to be able to console people who needed it. And honestly, we were probably just as shaken up and your management. Now, not to mention, right after that, the racist supervisor I worked for used that opportunity to get rid of all of her Black managers that she had just hired as a diversity initiative. But on that day, everybody needed to have, we were made of stone. So yeah, I would have left too. Thank you, Miss Roberts.
Thank you.
Miss Richland, I haven't seen you in a while. You need to unmute.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you,
Hi.
Judith. And hi, Helen. Thank you, Judith and David, for your stories.
You're welcome.
I feel what you're feeling because I was there that day, but I wasn't in the towers. My building was 95 Broadway. I'm not sure if I have the right number because some of these things I blacked out of my mind because I really haven't been back there since. Even though I've been to New York, I have not gone down to ground zero because it's traumatic for me. I worked in the area. My husband also was a cop and he worked at One Police Plaza. So that day was very traumatic for my entire family because we were caught up in it, but not as close as the people who were at the towers. So I came in after the two planes. I got off on Wall Street, walked down, tried to get into my building. I'm making it short because of time. Try to get into my building because I was a art director and I was on deadline day. Also came in early because I wanted to go and vote after work. I also took the plane. I was actually in the atrium a couple of days before leaving for Florida to pick up my kids from vacation to bring them back for school. And just like you, Judith, we were sitting in the atrium. I also visited my brother who worked in the towers. And my thought that day was going up in the elevator was, if I ever was to work in these buildings, I would need a parachute. Because if anything happened, I would break a window and have to parachute down. So that was my thought. And I didn't want to be there because my company used to have office in the building before the first bomb. And they moved the offices to Midtown. And then about a year before the Trade Center incident, they moved back to Broadway. And that was traumatic for all of us. And then we got used to it and everything was like usual. So that day I came in for work. I walked down Wall Street, walked back up, I think the street where Century 21 is on. And as I'm approaching my building, this tall Jewish guy was walking away towards the seaport. And he said to me and another couple walking, he said, the towers are gonna come down. And I didn't believe him, and neither did the people who was walking towards the tower with me didn't believe him. And so we proceeded to walk towards the tower. I tried to get into my building and the police had it roped off. And they said, no, we're emptying the building. So I walked towards the computer place. I think it was Sam Ash or something like that. And we just stood and watched what was going on. And then I actually saw the top of the building break off, the first collapse. And then the building imploded and I ran towards the Brooklyn Bridge. That day, I wasn't carrying my computer bag because I had a laptop from work. I proceeded to jump over the car towards the pedestrian part of the bridge to walk over. I can't even get the words out. I jumped over that, running until everything went black. I got over to the pedestrian side. I was on the traffic side, got over to the pedestrian side. Everything went black. That was the first tower collapse. And like you said, people were being very kind to each other that day. This man I didn't know took his coat and covered me and him with his coat during the first collapse. So as I'm walking, I didn't get all that soot all over me. And then we continued to walk over the bridge. He separated from me as things started clearing. And I met three fellows, three Black men walking on the bridge. And Helen, I sent you a picture of us standing over the bridge. I don't know if it would be able to be seen. But these guys, we started talking about what was going on. And as Black people, we were saying to ourselves, I hope America listens to what the world feels we've been doing to them. I hope America listens. And we were going through a conversation about what America has been doing all around the world. And as we walked, I was listening to other people's story. One of the guys, he wasn't working, but he came down to go to a jewelry store across the street from my building to get an engagement ring for his fiance who worked in the towers. And so his concern was, it was surreal. We didn't know what was going on. So his concern was whether or not he will see his fiance after the towers. And so we proceeded to walk, we separated. I had to go and pick up my kids. So I kept walking, left the guys, and a reporter, someone caught a photograph of me turning to the second building collapsing on the Brooklyn Bridge. And I just proceeded to try and make my way all the way to Starrett City on the other side of Brooklyn to get to my kids' school, because my kids' school could actually see the towers from their window. And all that I was thinking is the trauma my kids were going through, because they knew where I worked. And they knew their dad was a police officer and he would be going to work. But he was off that day, and I was trying to call him to say, don't come in to work. But the tower, everything was jammed. So he did make his way into work, and he got down there at the second tower collapse. Had he been working that day, he works at one police plaza, he would be in the towers, because that's what police officers do. They go towards whatever's happening to save people. And so I made my way to the kids' school and got them. And that day we were in trauma because they knew their dad was out working. We didn't hear from him until like 2 o'clock in the morning, whether or not he was safe. So I tried to make it very quick. So that was my story about 9/11. And to this day, I'm still traumatized going down to Ground Zero. I haven't gone there yet. And it will take something for me to go there.
I'm trying to open your picture, but I'm having a problem with it. So if you can share it, you can share it. You can share it yourself if you can open it up. But
Okay.
thank you, Richland.
Okay.
We're going to get through the next through hands. And you are right, to talk about, 9/11, and there's so many stories and why it happened and who did it. And, it makes me think of not only, I listened to our guest today, and I'm wondering, did all of us, did we receive the people who were there, did they receive the proper follow-up and therapy that they needed? It takes me to being in Louisiana after Katrina, and, Black people were just ignored. They still to this day, I don't think, have had the proper psychological care that they need. And, how are we treated in these types of situations? Please jump right in, Dave. Jump right in.
I was going to say, for people, survivors, I'm a member of the World Trade Registry, Health Registry. And so I get regular checkups at Bellevue. There's a health registry at various hospitals. Bellevue is one of the main ones. So for me, at least, I've been on a regular basis. As a result of 9/11, I've had cancers and asthma. So
thank you for sharing. I didn't want to ask because it's personal. Yeah. I wondered.
Yeah.
How about you, Judith? Can I ask? Do you have medical effects? You don't have to answer that.
I saw a psychologist for about 7 years. It was twice a week, every week, for the first 18 months when I was in New York, and then I left New York in 2003, and I continued seeing a therapist in California after I moved.
Mhm.
The workers' compensation did not. I spent years trying to get my bills settled, my therapist eventually, and the acupuncturist that I went to see, they eventually said, if they don't pay anything, they will just write it off. Eventually they were paid, but it was very difficult trying to get.
So even that's interesting because as I told you, I lost my job as a result of 9/11. We were laid off. And the money that was available to people who were victims, because at this point I'm considered a victim as well, it was crazy. I don't think I paid a personal bill for over a year. Well, for at least a year. It was a long time. All you had to do was all these organizations they had, just like now after George Floyd, there was all this money that was available, and all you had to do was submit your bill, and they didn't pay you, they paid your rent directly, they paid your credit card, or they wrote out checks and you did. I mean, it was just that kind of thing that was happening. So when I hear people like you who were so intimately affected and had problems securing funding, and the same thing with Miss Borders. Miss Borders passes away in 2015. She has stomach cancer and she can't afford the surgery that she needs. That's just unacceptable to me and very interesting. So yeah. Real quickly, I know this is funny to tell Linda to be quick, but Linda, we need you to be
I'll
quick.
try.
And
Oh.
we have, no, you need to, because it's after 11, so it's 12 o'clock or so
Yeah,
over
that's
there.
right.
And
Years to go.
it's
I want
so
and I want
wonderful.
her to hear this. First of all, I want to thank all of you for telling your stories. And when Helen sends this, I'm definitely going to use it to talk to young people who were not born at that time. You know, I come across a lot of young people who have no idea what went on. And so I'll be sure to share this with them. I encourage everybody else to try to do that too. With regard to America, I thought that the first 48 to 72 hours, going back to David Hood, it was as close to what America has professed to be in the history of this country up to today. And I think that's something we need to remember. Just a quick story. I wasn't in New York. I had just finished walking my 5 miles with my girlfriend, and I had just come out of the shower when I heard the story. But what was most interesting, aside from the fact that that's the love that you talked about, David, people, I think, authentically had it for 48 to 72 hours. And I think we can look at that as a model for what America could be, but all of us have to play a role in it. Anyway, I had finished the walk, came out the shower, and then I heard it on the radio. What happened is that I walked every day. We did 5 to 8 miles like every day. And so my girlfriend Cheryl and I, we decided the next day we're going to still walk. And what was interesting, we walked through Glen Ridge, East Orange, if you know, New Jersey. And what's most interesting, people who never or ignored the fact we were walking through their community actually came out of their houses to wave to us and say hello. And we came to the conclusion that we were providing some normalcy to them because we walked anyway, right? And so they saw something that was normal, even though they didn't pay attention, or they did pay attention to Black women walking through this wealthy white community. This one time, I thought we brought something that they didn't have, and it meant a lot to them. That was basically the story. I saw the other one come down because my law office had a big window where I could see the other one coming down. The one thing I remember, and going back to, I forgot who said, I don't know if it was Shirley or not, but I heard a Black Panther say they're coming to get us that same day. Whoever they didn't get, they're going to come back. And the other part was most interesting to me, because I'm a very curious person, is that none of the Saudi planes were the only planes that were allowed to be in the air. And if you know, I encourage you to do your homework. You will find out that the Bush family had a relationship with the Saudis all the way back to the 1800s. And they were the only ones. And also, and Dave, you might know this in terms of the members of the Carlyle group, which were the Bushes. And unfortunately, there was also the brother of Osama bin Laden, who was a member of the Carlyle group. So I'm just throwing it out for you to do your homework. I go back to what Lenny said. I'm curious. I hate that these stories even exist, but I want to know how we got in a position in the first place. And I think we all need to not forget that part, because as Helen mentioned before, this whole surveillance system, all the things that came out, right? And we know there've been incidents throughout the history of this country. So I'm just saying, do your homework, be curious. We need to know why. After 21 years, we still don't know why. And that's a question we should all be asking. We shouldn't even have these stories in the first place. But I appreciate, I know it's like, really hard. I looked at Judith and, just her energy and Dave's energy and Donita's energy, because I know Donita, I know her personally, but your energy, we really appreciate it. The universe has kept you, aware of what's going on, and it's giving you the strength that you have. The collective of all of us, the cultural knowledge that got us through 600 years has also got you through too. So, I wish you all the best, and take care.
That was beautiful, Linda. Thank you so much. I don't think I've ever seen her be that brief. So that was great. Yeah, and we can speculate why, I think, we all have our reasons about what we think really happened to Flight 93 over Shanksville. And I understand that in the Spike Lee movie, there was even talk about that, what might have happened to that flight. And, we also know that the United States has quite a history. So perhaps some things about 9/11 may have been inevitable. I don't know. I will leave that for speculation for you all. Donna.
Let me just say
Dave.
one thing.
Please.
Keep in mind that the same people that attacked the World Trade Center on 9/11 were the same people who were trying to attack the United States and almost succeeded in 1993. That's the same people. So, Al Qaeda is Al Qaeda, we have to, a lot of the information, unfortunately, that we know were mangled by the various agencies leading up to 9/11. And if you look at the 9/11 Commission, some of it is out there, for us to know about. And a lot of it has to do with the way the agencies were set up. But one of the things, obviously, that we know is how our society is also set up. It's no accident when the former speaker just said, we may have the best of intentions, but there's certain structural impediments in our society and certain things in our society that prevents even the best of intentions from coming to fruition. So we just have to keep that in mind, that sometimes people have evil intentions, but sometimes people have the best of intentions, but because of the structural impediments in this society, even when we have the best of intentions, it doesn't succeed because, certain things in society are structured in such a way that it prevents it from happening. So.
Absolutely. And, we know that no matter what, there are, like you said, there are just ill-intended people, and somehow we have to, but if you think about what happened then and the outpouring of the patriotism and the support, it was the same kind of, when I'm trying to compare it to the sentiment of the country post George Floyd, right? There was this, and I'm going to share on here with you all, I shared it in the email, but the firefighters, the Black firefighters who originally, what I remember was that they didn't want the American flag on the back of their truck, and people went ballistic because how dare you not be patriotic, right? How dare you not be patriotic? So the story that I couldn't find the story because I was so busy associating everything with New York. This actually happened with firefighters in Florida, so I was able to find the story. And they're saying that, they had mentioned, these Black firefighters had mentioned in the, what do they call the house, the firehouse or whatever they call it, that they would hope that, Americans would, they said something like, as soon as this is all over, people will go right back to discrimination and all those other things.
And
so
they did.
had made that comment, which is, the same comments I'm sure we heard after George Floyd. But the article, if you'll look at it, it says that the reason they didn't want the flags on their truck had something to do with safety or what have you, but it was blown out of proportion. But Black people, I think, there are so many things that happen in this country that we respond to differently than do our white counterparts. And I was listening to someone today, what's his name? Alshi Verdi, the guy who's on CNN. What's his name? The reporter.
Archie Velshi?
Him. Yes, I'm messing up his name. And he was interviewing
Ali Velshi, sorry.
he was interviewing a reporter from London, and he shared in his introduction, some of the crimes committed by the British government. And this guy totally told him how it was inappropriate. And interestingly enough, the British historian, he wasn't a reporter, he was a historian, he didn't want to talk about that. And he said that, it was because Ali said, well, there are even people in England who think it's time for this monarchy stuff to end or what have you, or they speak about. And he is feeling, the historian said something about, oh no, I think Alshi, I can mess up his name.
Ali Velshi.
Ali Velshi. He said there were at least 10 to 15% of the people in London, in Great Britain, who agreed with what other people were saying. And the historian said, why would you listen to 10 to 15% of the people when you listen to the 85%? And Mr. Velshi said, that's the problem, that the minority is not given a voice. And we're affected, and we're just supposed to fall in line and not talk about how we feel. So so there's comparisons to all of this. Donna, I'm sorry, please go with your question. Donna.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, Helen, thank you for this space. It's been a really good session today, and I want to thank all the presenters. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your transparency, and thank you for sharing what happened on 9/11 and your experience. I remember that day. I'm a retired educator, but as a high school teacher, our male students have to register for the armed forces draft, in high school. And so I was having career day in my class that particular day. And I had the branch from the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy there. And midway through their presentation, they got a call. They were on high alert because of what had happened, and they had to leave. And I tell you, that day was a day of mourning at a high school. It was horrific. A lot of trauma. Counselors called in because some of the students had parents that worked in New York, and they flew from Georgia to New York to work, and family members. And I just wanted to share that I remember that day vividly. And it will never escape my mind. I also have a question for Judith, your boss. I'm just wondering, did he make it out?
Yes, he did.
Praise God.
And he did some not so nice things after, but I was a whistleblower to that.
Good for you.
Thank you.
That's interesting because the woman who terminated me, and she laid us off. She laid because she had run a lily white organization. If you can imagine, in New York City for 35 years, this woman will have you believe that she could not find Black people for management. And the only reason she hired me and an Iranian and Puerto Ricans and gay people, I mean, we were just we had a Filipino, we were like the Rainbow Coalition. And it was only because diversity was tied to her bonus. And while I can be upset with her about that, I have to look at a company that allowed that to happen for all those years. And then, of course, your management, so you don't have any protections. So when 9/11 happened, I said she bleached the rainbow. She got rid of us. And you said something that triggered, I was going to add to it, but it just went out of my mind what I was going to say. But, it was the same kind of thing with her. I forget what you just said. Oh, when she let us go, right? She wasn't as brave. I worked right up to the last day. I was excellent at this job. It was perfect. If I were a white woman, they would have made me the domicile man. I mean, that's how good I was. And I enjoyed it. And I worked right up to the last day. most people got pissed and just never came back to work. And then of course they had the token white girl who they had to let go, because otherwise it looked like they really let only minorities go. But I worked up to the last day, and she did not come to work on my last day. And of course she knew, me being me, that I was going to have words with her on that day. The flight attendants had, fought to keep me and whatever. It was just crazy. And management wouldn't budge, the whole thing. And I approached her. I called her. She didn't come to work that day, so I called her the next day on her, or the first day out, probably maybe 2 days later, whatever. And to my surprise, she took my call. And she was a horrible woman. She was not a nice woman at all. And like the person that you're speaking of, I said to her, she was a cancer survivor, and she was just nasty. And I asked her, did she really think that God had spared her life so that she could spend her remaining days just being nasty to people? And she literally listened to me, which was crazy, but I felt that I needed to say that to her. So, you think going through something so horrific that some humanity would surface, and for some people there is just no humanity. So she could care less, I'm sure, about what I had to say to her, but I needed to say that to her. And that was in 2001. And as a result of that, I ended up, that's when I went to law school after that incident happened. So, there's some silver lining to everything at the end of the day, right? So anyway, I don't see any more hands up. I cannot thank you both enough. And Donita, who's gone, and I appreciate all of your time. This forum is open to you whenever you want to come. We meet all the time. Dave, it's mostly Black women, but we do have sessions like this that we just have community conversations. And I hope that you will come back and share some time.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciated this, and I really appreciated all of the love that you guys shared.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We're a loving bunch. And Miss Judith, thank you so much, because you just hung with us the whole time. I've been chatting her all along saying, we understand if you're sleepy, go, So thank you so much for hanging out with us until the end. Did you have any parting words you wanted to share with us?
Just thank you. Thank you, Helen, for this, to be able to hear the other stories, all of the other stories. Thank you, because I think it's important for us to be able to listen to what other people have gone through, regardless of where we are or where we were that day, and know that in each sharing, we are helping somebody else, whether it's to connect the dots or to just make sense of things. Even in speaking to that journalist last week, something I learned is that his mother lived next door to the mother of Saeed Bahari, who is the technical mastermind who worked with bin Laden. And when he interviewed Saeed's mother, this is Saeed Bahari, and he did a story with the mother.
Okay.
She didn't want to speak. She claimed not to have known where her son was, but she spoke to the journalist because she thought that since this article would be posted at airports and different places, the magazine that he writes for, that somehow or other her son will get the story, see the story and get in touch with her. Or get in touch with a family member.
Wow.
So it's important for us, no matter what, to share our story, as long as we are educating others, as long as we, Dave, thank you for what you've gone through and for where you are in what you've gone through. And we, Rishlin I think that's your name. You said you haven't gone down to the World Trade Center. I went there in, I was in New York in 2019, and I went there with Lieutenant Mike Pappas, who had found my pictures at the World Trade Center, the ones that I thought were lost. And a story came out of that. And he and I met there with his wife and my husband, and we went to the World Trade Center together. It is the one thing I needed to do. I will not do it again. But I think it's important for all of us to at least go to the site. If we don't go to the museum, that's a totally different thing. That was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life, to go to the World Trade Center Museum and to see the fire trucks and to see some of what's in there. But a few weeks ago, I went back to New York and I went to the site myself, and I got to the pool and found out where Erica Van Acker's in the Tower 2 area, where her name is placed on the memorial pool. So as long as you've got the full name of colleagues, you could actually go to security and they will tell you where your colleagues' names are mentioned at the memorial pool. There are different things that we can learn from each other. And it's important, as Dave said earlier, and Helen, obviously, for having this session, it's important for us to be speaking to each other and educating one another and just being a support in one way or another.
Putting a face to
I want to thank you. I want to also say to folks, one of the things that I did for me at least, my way of healing was to really go back to the site. And I actually did tours for people of the site because I think I mentioned I have an intimate knowledge of the World Trade Center site. And so one of my ways of coping or healing was to really get people to get back to the site and to know what happened, and particularly how the site was developed before, what happened before, what happened then. So I spent a lot of time at the site. Judith, if you really want to find somebody there, it's really easy. There are kiosks on the site. You put the person's name in, and the way the names are arranged around the reflecting pools, it's called meaningful adjacencies. So if you know any one person, you can know all of the people around them, because all of the people around them have a relationship with that person. That's how they set up the names. So that's the way you do it.
I was able to find my mentor's name, but I could not find Larry's name because I didn't know his last name. The security guard of the Tower 2, who was always there every morning when I got in.
Okay. He would have been around the first pool, the South Pool, because he was in Tower 2. And if he's affiliated with a company, you probably would be with that group with company names. So if you know where he worked, you'll probably find him among the names of the people. If you know anybody who worked for that company, you'll be there.
Okay.
You know, Dave, when I hear you say that you went back to Ground Zero and did tours, I don't know how many of you have been to South Africa, but a lot of the a lot of the inmates from Robbins Island now live there and do tours. And I'm like, that. Right. I mean, I'm comparing them, but still, it's a horrific. That's what came to mind when you said that. Have you heard that before?
Well, now that I bring up the Robben Island, but I can definitely, I can agree with that. I can relate to that. That definitely makes sense. Yes.
So anyway,
David,
go ahead, Judith.
What is the group called? Meaningful?
No, the way they arrange the names around the pools, the reflecting pools, what happened is they have as Helen mentioned, in terms of the number of people around the pools, the two pools have all of the people who died on 9/11. Right. So the South Pool, which is the one that you talked about with Tower 2, has all of the people from Tower 2, as well as the people from Flight 93 and the people from the Pentagon. So those are all the names, and also the firefighters, because the 343 firefighters were linked together, like I said, because of meaningful adjacencies. So what they do is they group the people, the names of the people, by who they're affiliated with, their affiliation. And that's how you can know. If you know one person, you shouldn't, and you know who that person is affiliated with, or what company or whatever it is, you should be able to find other people around that.
Okay, thank you.
This has been such an interesting call. I want us to also recognize that if we didn't do this call, we didn't meet last week, but August 29th, I forget what year it was, but you know, it was the anniversary of Katrina, which we still have so many unanswered questions and unresolved feelings around Katrina. So I want to just acknowledge that suffering in our community too before we conclude here today. And I just want to thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your stories, our guests for giving of your time and hanging with us, because this has gone on for a little while. But thank you so much for hanging out with us. Dave, I would love to have you come back again and talk to us, because you know, you mentioned inviting Sharon to Guyana. Guyana? Is that where you're from? No, Grenada.
No, I'm from Grenada.
Yes.
But Sharon has an open invitation to come down to
Well,
Grenada.
what about me?
So,
he didn't
and
invite
everybody
me.
is welcome. Grenada is it's called the Spice Island. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
But no, on a serious note, the third Sunday of every month, what we normally do is have Black folks come in and talk to us who are living in other places about living there. So maybe you'll come back and talk to us about Grenada.
Sure.
I think that the next country we're going to do is Liberia, which might be next Sunday. I haven't quite put it together yet, but yeah. And I'm getting a reminder here to let everybody know two things. One, if you're in the South Jersey area, and even if you're not, I encourage you to go see the movie The Woman King. It opens up next Friday, but here in South Jersey, when Black women gather, we'll gather. This will be our first gathering since COVID, but we will gather at the AMC Theater in Voorhees to watch the film and then engage in a community discussion. It's very powerful. So I see you over there, Tom Carroll. How you doing? But I see you. So if you're in the South Jersey area, I hope that you'll join us for that. And then also remember, we're concluding our series. No, it's not our conclusion. I think it's a third of 4 discussions that we're going to have talking about mental health in the Black community. And that will be on the 25th. And the topic will be police. Actually, she's put it here better than me. So mental health crisis in the Black community as it pertains to police response. And we know what happens when the police respond to our community. And that too, Dave, just so you know, that's a conversation that we will, you know, open up to men as well. So anyway, that's what's happening on this end. I cannot thank you enough. And as always, we have to conclude by saying, when Black women gather, what happens? Please unmute and say it for me.
Amazing things happen.
Wonderful.
Change happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, when we're in person, that's going to go over really well, right? Because we
Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you so much, Dave and
Dave.
Judith.
Thanks again, Helen.
And,
Judith, and Helen, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording and we can hang out for it. And the guests are welcome to, everybody's welcome to leave, but we're going to hang out for just a few minutes just to wrap up and see what's happening with people and things that you might have wanted to say that you weren't comfortable saying with the cameras going.
Okay.
So,
okay. See you guys.
Good night, Dave.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Judith too. Good night to everybody.
Good night.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording right now.
Night all. Bye.